Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I'm going to be letting you know why Wargaming have made a turtle mistake. You know what I'm trying to say, a total mistake in buffing this vehicle, the Turtle. This tank, as I talked about on Sunday, I was predicting was going to be absolutely outrageous. The problem with Wargaming's buffing and nerfing is that there's no actual way to be able to truly test a vehicle on their test server. Plus, when statistics go to the test server, they pretty much go through unchanged. 90 to 95% of all of the content that goes through to the test server, irrelevant of what the community's feedback is, will just go into the live server because Wargaming have done all of their testing in the background. Well, I can tell you I have no idea who tested the Turtle to think that this was an acceptable tank to go into the game with its buffs in the 1.22 update. This tank has received arguably, I'd say, some of the biggest buffs in the history of premium tanks. Wargaming took a vehicle that was a slow, lumbering tank that had to make sacrifices with the equipment that it picked to improve that speed, aka using a turbo, or even back in the day, couldn't use a turbo and was literally limited to 20 kilometers an hour. And now the vehicle is just an absolute monster. Wargaming have buffed the penetration on the standard rounds of this tank. They buffed it from 224 to 240, so you don't have to fire so much gold. It's not really the biggest of upgrades on a vehicle, outside of just you make more credits now because you have to fire less gold. However, they've also buffed the premium penetration of this tank, which is one of the tank's biggest weaknesses, to 270. So it's got more than enough to be able to go through some more thickly armored plates, or alternatively to go through tier 10s. Add to that, they also improved the shell velocity of this tank from a horrible 792 up to 1050 on its standard rounds, which is pretty okay when it comes down to now sniping at long range or hitting moving targets. But by far the biggest thing that they did to this tank was increasing its top speed limit from 20 to 25 and also improving its reverse speed from 10, again one of the big vulnerabilities of the vehicle, in which allowed you to get its side, and when you do get the side of the Turtle, this thing is easy to be able to put on its back and absolutely feast upon, from 10 kilometers an hour to 12. So it's what Wargaming have basically taken away all of the weaknesses of this vehicle. They've taken away its penetration problems, they've taken away its top speed problem, they've taken away its reverse speed problem, and so what have I done? Well, I decided why not just drop the turbo and use a durability device instead, while also still having the luxuries of a gun rammer and vents to be able to take this thing to having literally tier 10 medium tank damage per minute, or even tier 10 tank destroyer damage per minute. This thing has a base damage per minute of 2,900. Now, that wasn't such a big deal for the Turtle when it wasn't able to race around the battlefield, when it struggled with being able to penetrate enemy tanks, especially at decent distances, when it struggled at being able to use its poor shell velocity to snipe at tanks that were moving, or to just miss their weak points while they're making small micro adjustments. I had no problem with the Turtle's armor or with the vehicle as it was, even though it actually still had like a 51% win ratio in World of Tanks before Wargaming buffed it, which is just absolutely crazy to me that Wargaming would be saying, alright, the Turtle, it's absolutely balanced inside World of Tanks, let's buff every aspect of this tank that is, I guess, holding it back from being completely overpowered, and just release it upon the battlefield. This thing, I played it like 20 times yesterday, and I had probably some of my best results in any tier 8 tank destroyer of all time. I'd say I was probably having more kind of like tier 9 tank destroyer games, or even arguably this thing is starting to become like a tier 10 tank destroyer within some regards as well. Now sure, it doesn't have the penetration, but it has better damage per minute than a T123 or a T124 at Object 268, any of those kind of vehicles. And now that the tank is kind of like as fast as a T123, having this kind of armor at tier 8 as well, where when you do get against tier 9 and tier 10 tanks, you can suffer, but when you're getting against tier 6s and 7s, I just don't know what they're really even meant to do against this vehicle. And when you're against tier 8s, well, it's just such a big struggle for them. Honestly, on top of the hill, before I came down and suddenly I was starting to get nailed by either gold rounds or not using my armor so effectively, I just felt as if all of those tanks that were in front of me, they were already dead before they'd even started to kind of like engage this tank. Now, I know you're probably saying, oh, why don't they try and flank? Why don't they try and, I don't know, load gold and fire at the weak points of this vehicle? Well, even this tank has 254 millimeters of armor. So if we look at most of the tier 8 tanks, they, like, not that many tier 8 tanks even have that much armor. Oh, sorry, that much penetration, I should say, to be able to get through the turtle's armor. And so, lower tier tanks stand no chance. Equal tier tanks struggle to be able to get through this thing's armor unless they can manage to hit the lower plate. And higher tier tanks, well, they're still going to have to deal with the fact that, well, look, higher tier tanks are never what are meant to struggle against lower tier vehicles. And when you do start to have that, then that's when you have vehicles like the BZ-176. That's when you have vehicles like the Skoda T56. And I don't think I'm being bold with saying that this was a huge oversight from Wargaming with buffing this tank. When they've buffed the top speed limit of this vehicle, it's almost as if you just had a turbo on this vehicle. You've just got a 4th equipment slot. It's absolutely bonkers. I don't know why Wargaming are also trying to speed the game up so much within that regard as well. One of the key reasons as to why we are having these like pathetic 4-minute games, although this one is actually quite long by World of Tanks standards, with just over 6 minutes here. Although, like, this is Malinovka, for goodness sake. It's meant to be one of the hardest maps to actually dig your opponents out of. And because we don't have a light tank, as there was only one on the team and they managed to die substantially early inside this battle, it's only really like this campy part at the end of the game that's slowing it down. Apart from that, this thing is just chugging along now as if it had a turbo, but now it can use a durability device, which again, you could actually still use a durability device and a turbo on this thing and go at 30 kilometers an hour, as I'm going to be doing later on in this video. But it's just absolutely bonkers to me that Wargaming would buff a vehicle so much. And when you're buffing things that literally the only reasons why you are holding the vehicle back, I just don't know how this thing managed to get through testing. And it really alarms me with Wargaming's testing procedure that they even thought that this would be reasonable. And why they would take a tank that already was performing very well at 51% win ratio and think that they wanted to turn it up to 10. Spoilers, the artillery drowns themselves. Let's take a look at some more gameplay, this time not against tier 8s. So now we're going to be rolling out against tier 10 tanks, and once again, I'm not using a turbo on this vehicle. I know, QuickyBaby not using a turbo on a tank, how outrageous is that? But that's because so many maps in World of Tanks are all based around one location. The game is won and lost depending on that engagement. And so I want to try and have as many hit points as I can to be able to win that engagement while maximizing my damage per minute. And also making sure with the durability device that I'm taking away one of the key weaknesses of this tank, which is you're meant to track it, you're meant to lock it in place, you're meant to stop it farming you, and you're meant to stop it from either like progressing to be able to get into that position to farm you, or to stop it from being able to escape in that scenario. And again, when Wargaming basically make this vehicle as fast as some of the slower heavies with not a bad power to weight ratio, you don't really need a turbo when you're on a map like this. You can go at 25 kilometers an hour. Now, fair play, this is kind of like the dream scenario for this tank. I'm using its 10 degrees of gun depression on a ridgeline. And to all intents and purposes, I'm kind of like a Conqueror with, or even like a Super Conqueror with more damage per minute in this kind of a situation. Now, my armor isn't as good as it would be on a Super Conqueror, but it's still good enough. It's good enough to dissuade our opponents from taking easy shots at this vehicle as some of the other glass cannons or even some of the mediums. So now we've got the Tortoise opposite us here. This is the Tech Tree tank, another fearsome vehicle, completely overpowered, has one of the best win ratios in the whole of World of Tanks tier for tier. If not, it has the best win ratio of any Tech Tree tank. I think at tier 9 or tier 10. But I'm actually going to focus on the 114 here. I'm not too worried about the Tortoise because I can always fall back. But I don't want to get slammed in the side by the 114. And you know what? Why do I even need to bother? I've scared them off, I've pushed them back, and I can go back to farming these tier 10s. Well, unless we get a juicy opportunity to go through a VK like here. And just look at this thing's damage per minute. We're using gun rammer, vents, we've put a bounty, gun rammer directive on this thing. Not a bounty, sorry, just a gun rammer directive on this vehicle. And now we are just going to absolute town on our opponents here. Penning a standard round on the IS-4, they fire a gold round into us. We can finish off the Jagdpanzer, and I'll turn our attention back towards the tier 10 Soviet heavy tank. And it's just going up and up. This is kind of like an autoloader without an autoloader within that regard. 330 damage every 5 seconds. My Object 140, for example, fair enough without a directive, has that kind of rate of fire. I reload every 5 seconds, I believe, with Bond equipment. However, I don't have 330 alpha. I have 320 on a tier 10 medium tank. And again, this vehicle was perfectly fine before. Everything that you're seeing with regards to the firepower of this tank is unchanged. But what has changed is that now the vehicle can go so outrageously fast forwards compared to what it could previously. You can sacrifice that turbo to increase the durability, or you can take vents to be able to improve the average accuracy on the vehicle. Previously, I used to like taking a build like durability with a gun rammer and a turbo on this tank. But now with so many maps being just frankly almost predetermined games like this, 3.5 minutes in and it's just already over, why do we need a turbo when I'm fast enough at 25 kilometers an hour? But more importantly, the whole fight is like, the whole game is decided for the fight over this location. It takes too long for the medium tanks to be able to flank out towards the south. It just doesn't really make a difference. And what I'd like to highlight here is look how clutch we can even snipe on this vehicle now with the improved shell velocity. Boom, in before our allies can manage to react to the Char Future 4, and can we even get the shot on the GW Tiger? Of course we can, picking up 5 kills in this tier 10 matchup. This was over 8,000 combined in a 4-minute game against tier 10 tanks. So I guess it's not just the tier 8s and the tier 6s of this thing is going to be farming up. However, this is one of those maps where I do feel like the turbo can really help out to be able to get into position. So with the previous 2 games on Malinovka and on, is it Westfield? I should probably know that after playing like 100,000 games of World of Tanks. Those 2 maps, I don't really feel like this tank needs a turbo. Now we're going to see this thing just driving along at 29 kilometers an hour with a turbo. I don't know what Wargaming's math is, by the way. I'm pretty sure the Bounty turbo on this vehicle is meant to increase top speed by 5 kilometers an hour. And 25 plus 5. It looks like for some reason it's actually nearly getting at 30 in the water here. Why would the tank go slightly faster in the water than it would do along the flat? I digress. I'm getting distracted. Let's focus on the fact that this thing now is just so darn fast, in addition to all of that firepower, in addition to some pretty darn good frontal armor and flexibility. A lot of people have been telling me, oh, QB the Turtle, it's not even going to be as close as the TS5. They're completely wrong. They have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. The TS5 is good from a gold pen perspective, and when your opponents sit in front of you. However, the Turtle, with that flexibility, with the gun depression and the gun arc, is going to do things that the TS5 could only dream of. Now, if I was playing a TS5 here, I'd probably make my way along here, because you don't need gun depression for this part. But a Turtle, I could easily go along the high ground and be able to fight here. But I decided instead, why don't we set up kind of the ultimate ambush in World of Tanks? So, by defending this corner, I'm just hoping that I'm going to be able to create a crossfire. I'm trying to get my team to rally around. You can see I'm asking the Jagdtiger to make their way up north. Hopefully the Jagdtiger will get into that position. And I'm hoping as well that the 277 will fall back and that the 705 will fall back as well. I don't ever like to be the player to say multiple times, but when I really have like a strong inkling that there is going to be an opportunity to have a massive impact in the battle or to do something really funky, then better to just do it. And then if they want to, they can always hold their control key and just go click to the left of my name and mute me for the battle, add me to the blacklist for all I care. So you can see something very important to do when you're playing a tank like this, and that is to wedge your armor up as far as you can while you can still manage to maintain your gun depression. Because if you wedge your armor up, you hide your lower plate, but not only that, you make your upper hull so much more effective. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, what happens when you take a tank that pretty much has like near 4,000 damage per minute and you get the side of a load of vehicles who didn't think about this corner and just drive out in front of you? Alright, remember, this is a tier 10 matchup here. There's an M5Y, and that M5Y is firing regular rounds to start with. Let's see if he changes and starts to dab the 2 key when they bounce off the Turtle. And now I can manage to easily go through the upper hull of the T-32, albeit when firing gold. But I don't know what I'm going to be firing against. Tier 10 tanks, tier 8 tanks in this scenario. And they just don't know what to do. We've caught them in the mother of all crossfires. We ammo rack the Carnarvon. Now he's got to choose. Does he want his tracks or does he want his ammo rack? Well, he's probably needs to choose his tracks a little bit quicker than he is choosing because he won't have any hit points. He doesn't have an engine. Now, I'm deciding I want to shoot the 277 because I know that the Carnarvon's dead. The Carnarvon's not going to be able to escape. And why wouldn't I want the extra damage that I can get on the 277 instead? And just like that, I guess that was about a minute of continuous ambush. Possibly one of the greatest ambushes I've seen in 100,000 battles of playing this game. I don't think I've seen a better ambush than that. Tier 8 tank against Tier 9 and Tier 10 tanks, and some Tier 8s, holding the back, farming them up, and bouncing a gold round from the M5Y, bouncing a gold round from the Object 705, which has the IS-7's gun, although one round from the 705 did manage to penetrate us in this flatter upper part, which is one of the reasons why you want to make sure that you are angling your armor up as much as possible. So I'm going to let my team know I'm going to be able to help them out. The 705 gets a shot into me, kills my driver, and I got to be just a little bit sneaky here. And look, this is where the TS5 would just really struggle. But talk about struggle, that was just a really poor shot. I should have been able to hit that one. Big misplay there to shoot the tracks. And unfortunately, my team is wilting around me. And it was so important that we pulled off this ambush. I got a Tier 9 and a Tier 10 heavy tank in front of me, but who is the Predator? Well, I clearly am the Predator in this scenario. So we go through the 705. We dealt 5,000 damage now, pretty much in the last couple of minutes of combat. And we have, not single-handedly, but we've had a tremendous impact. An impact that this vehicle always could have had. This is something that I want to highlight. What Wargaming's buffs haven't really changed that fight there. This tank could have always have done that. It could have always had that damage per minute. They haven't buffed the accuracy. All they've done is improve the dispersion when you're moving, so you can be more accurate faster after you've moved, and so you don't really have to sit stationary like we were in that scenario. But what I'm trying to highlight is that this tank, when it could only do stuff like that in the corner, and boy, can it do stuff like that very well, still had a 51% win ratio. It's okay to have extreme tanks in World of Tanks when they can't be extreme in all of their games. Clearly, it was working out well for the Turtle previously. It had a big enough impact in enough of its games that it would still win more games than the average tank destroyer. However, when you take away all of the weaknesses of a vehicle, especially on a premium tank, then not only does it have those opportunities for just incredible carry and big strength, but now it doesn't have any weaknesses for all of the other games. Which is why yesterday I ended up having just an absolute staggering session in this tank. We're talking about, I think it was like 5,000 WN8 or something stupid, 4,000 or 5,000 WN8, 70 or 75% win ratio in the 20 games. And I was kind of getting like tier 10 3-mark requirements in this vehicle. Wargaming, they've made a turtle mistake with the buff on this tank. And this is where it becomes so darn dangerous. And that is that because it's a premium tank, as it stands, Wargaming can't fix their mistakes. They won't be able to nerf this tank. And so as more players become aware of what the Turtle is capable of, we're going to see more of these, frankly, toxic tanks in the matchmaker that it would just feel like it's irrelevant for you to play any equal or lower tier heavies against it. Let alone the scenario that we just saw when there were some higher tier heavies that almost felt irrelevant against this tank as well in that kind of a situation. So on Malinovka, we got a high caliber, a steel wall medal for managing to block more than this tank's hit points, and we get 7,700 combined, making a cool 177,000 credits profit. Next up on Westfield, a high caliber in a 4-minute game of tier 10 tanks with a Confederate medal for damaging 6 opponents that were subsequently killed by our allies, as well as also finishing off 5 ourselves, meaning that we hit 11 different tanks in that game of World of Tanks. And we make 137,000 credits profit. Next up, against tier 10 tanks, we deal nearly 6,000 damage, once again getting a high caliber medal. We get a Halonen's medal for destroying at least 2 enemy vehicles that were 2 tiers higher than this vehicle, which is a rather unusual one, netting a cool 178,000 credits profit in the 6 minutes that we played. And so the conclusion, brace yourselves, the Turtle is coming, and it's not even coming slowly at you anymore. And I'd like to add the caveat that all in all, Wargaming's buffs and nerfs have been fairly well thought out, but they've made a tremendous mistake here. Now, what will be interesting is whether Wargaming realize the mistake that they've made, and before they sell this again, they have an opportunity to fix it before they sell it. If they were to nerf the statistics down before anyone's managed to purchase this thing for real money, then they could avoid any kind of drama within that regard. If not, this thing, I believe, is going to be the most broken tier 8 tank destroyer in the game. And now that it's just so darn good, people won't really care about the relatively boring gameplay that the vehicle has when they can achieve outrageous results so easily. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know if you have played the turtle since it was buffed. Has it been working for you? Or maybe was I just getting lucky at all of the games that I played in this tank and somehow miraculously started to nail some of my highest experience, highest damage, and highest credits ever in this tank? Guess I just had a lucky session, right? Nothing to do with the statistics of this new absolute beast. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.